Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today I wanted to show you a little carving project that I did for my daughter who recently turned 10, and one of the presents that she asked for was to have her ears pierced, and I thought it would be a nice present to make a very first proper pair of earrings. So what I'm doing here is essentially carving a pair of guinea pigs. That's our own pets, and as you can see right now, these are the two little guys who have served as models for this project. They're technically hers and my wife's, but they're the two boys of the family. So I thought she would quite appreciate having these two little guys dangling from her ears. So for this project, what I did was use some off-cut American cherry, which I used for another project a few months ago. And what I'm doing is making sure that the shape is drawn as closely as possible on both pieces. So both pieces are more or less the same size. And I'm trying to match each face to the design so that both are at the very least the same general length. You'll see at the end that the design does effectively, there has been some differences in between the two, and in fact it turned out that each pig more or less resembled the two corresponding pigs, which was not entirely intentional. But so in this shot here you can see I'm starting by carving what will be the rear end of the animal, and by leaving the piece on the stock, that allows me to have a greater piece to hold on to as I carve, and I just basically refining, making sure the cut is as round as possible, and then here I'm starting on the face by cutting straight into the grain. I make sure that I don't slip out. That allows me to have some stopping points for when I carve the face and the underside of the mouth. It's not exactly a mouth because the pieces are so small that there are some fine details that I've had to leave out, mostly due to the restriction that the grain imposes on such a project. But I apologize, you can't really see very well the carving in great detail, but here effectively what I'm doing is make sure that I turn the piece of wood all the time to ensure that the animal remains symmetrical when I carve it. So what you don't want to do is always stay in the same place, otherwise you run the risk of carving too much on one side. So here you can see the result of some of the preliminary carving, and it's very much a work of just going back and forth, always checking, and I try to use a reference image as well to kind of make sure that I'm always heading towards the right direction for what I'm trying to achieve. This is a very small piece and therefore requires some very fine chips to be removed at any one time. It's not huge carving, so always refine the shape, and yeah, slowly but surely the animal starts to take form, and soon it doesn't really take very long for it to be finished product. So I've picked up my carving again, and as you can see, after carefully carving away up to the nose point, it just by itself kind of came out, which kind of gave me a nice flat section for the nose, which I can gently refine. Now that leaves me with this really small piece that I need to shape, that will kind of mostly already looks like, well, you can see the shape of a guinea pig in here, and I think with a little bit more fine-tuning I can make it look like something that my daughter will appreciate. So let's get on with it. The most important thing is to just, at this point, is to try and get the eyes to look right. So guinea pigs have a kind of a ridge section in the middle for the nose, which I kind of want to make sure is maintained. So it doesn't need to be super sharp, but it needs to be kind of pronounced enough, which leaves me space on either side to sort of like gently uncover the eyes, but not too much, because otherwise it'll just look weird. Now, at this stage, I thought it would be useful to say a few words about the tool that I'm using. This is my Flex Cut craft carver set. It is effectively a handle with a set of interchangeable blades. Now, the blade that I'm primarily using for about 95% of this project is a very shallow gouge, which is very useful both for rough carving and for detailing, and for kind of smoothing carving lines as well. Here in this particular shot, I'm also using my V tool to kind of get into little nooks and crannies to kind of fine tune the eyes as well. And I've also tried to use one, like a very thin gouge, but I didn't find it particularly useful in this particular case. I thought maybe I could use it for the eyes, but that didn't really work out the way I wanted. So most of it was done with this shallow gouge, and you can see the end result is not too bad. So for the finish, I had this set of sanding blocks which I got for free with Woodworking Crafts magazine, and I thought it would be perfect for that project because this particular block that I'm using has two sides, one at 240 for doing most of the rough sanding, which I have to say is very satisfying to do, and like 400 on the other side for really smoothing out the finished piece. So I highly recommend those. They are Model Craft sanding blocks. And finally here I'm using my soldering iron to effectively draw the eyes. I'm using a round tip just to make sure that the end result for the eyes is as round as possible, so I don't actually have to draw anything. I'll just have to kind of press it, and the soldering iron is set to its lowest setting just to make sure I don't overburn the wood itself, and I thought it turned out quite well. And finally, I don't really have an ice pick. I'm gonna get one from Jimmy soon, I hope, but I've used a pin effectively to draw a hole so I could place the hardware. Now I put the hardware first before I do the finish, simply so that I can have everything attached and just hold on to the piece in order to apply the finish. Now here both pieces I've got the hardware attached. Now I'm using the Vallejo polyurethane matte finish. I don't like gloss, so I'm using a matte finish, and 2 coats of this was enough. Just apply it with a brush, let the first coat dry for about 4 hours. Well, I left it dry overnight because I applied it in the evening, and then next coat I applied the next morning. But yeah, just apply it, let it dry, apply another coat, let it dry again, and that's it. It brings out the grain quite nicely, and this is the end result. So I hope you enjoy it, and thank you for watching.